Okay, here we go. All right, let's do this, Judds.
Okay.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Alliance Group podcast. And we have in the studio with us today the Judds, Kristen and Ed Judd from Five Rings Financial. Unbelievable story at Five Rings Financial that we're going to get into today. But thank you both for joining us. Welcome to Atlanta.
We're excited to be
Thank you.
here.
Awesome.
Love the rain.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, if you don't like the weather in Atlanta, just wait 5 minutes, right? Especially this time of year. But we're glad to have you guys. One thing I really wanted to get into today, I was excited to bring you guys in to talk about, first of all, your specific story, and then how it relates to the larger Five Ring story, which is just incredible. I was just, right before we hit record on this podcast, I was reading out the latest production or the last 10 years of production at Five Rings. So this is how much production Five Rings Financial is doing as a company. Reading these numbers off the past 10 years, these are in millions. So back in 2012, 1, then in 2013, 2, going forward, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, 6, 7. And then here's where it gets interesting in the last 3 years. 10 million, 15 million, and then on the course this year to do 20 million at Five Rings Financial.
Yeah.
How does that make you guys feel as you're listening to those numbers? And you've, Kristen, as we're going to talk about, you've been with this company for 9 years now, since 2013, which is one of those first numbers I said. That was the $2.2 million a year.
Yeah.
Right.
I feel like it's inevitable just because of our culture, our heart space. And it was just a matter of time for us to really catch stride. And things are getting really, really exciting at the company. And I feel like we're just getting started.
It kind of feels like that, right?
Yeah.
But how many times have you been in a position in your life where you're like, I wish I would have.
Right.
I was at the right time in the right place and I didn't.
Right.
Well, the
Apple
nice
stock
part-
for me, right? Apple stock. We all had
Exactly.
that moment where I was like,
there's
man,
so
it was
many
only
examples.
like $100 in 2008 or whatever.
Yeah. And when you find yourself in the right spot at the right time and having taken advantage of that and get in front of it, that's the first thing that comes to mind with me, that we are in the right spot at the right time.
Right. And the thing is, it's not like, I just brought up Apple stock, right? Which is like, well, that time has passed and good luck getting rich with Apple stock now. It's kind of the moment has passed and now you need to find the next one, right? That is not the case with Five Rings Financial because you are, as we speak,
trending up.
As we speak, you guys are exploding. You're in the middle of this kind of supernova, and it's just been an unbelievable ride. What I want to do for our viewers for the podcast today is I want to kind of tell that story about what is this company, Five Rings Financial. I want to talk about how you both got introduced to the company and kind of what you've witnessed over the years that you've been there. But let's actually start with you, Kristen. You came in 2013, correct?
Right. Yeah.
So tell me the story, because Five Rings is obviously growing in part because you guys are growing the amount of people that are at Five Rings. The opportunity, the Five Rings opportunity has been extended to so many people, and that is definitely a big part of what is driving the growth. How did you find out about Five Rings Financial, and who is it that introduced you to this opportunity way back in, again, 2013, correct?
Yeah. Well, we actually became clients before. So in 2012,
course, right.
So we went to a money class that we offer anyone to come to.
Money 101.
Yeah.
Money 101.
We went to that on a lunchtime basis. I had to bribe him a little bit to show up.
Bribed him with Chipotle, from what I understand.
It was Chipotle, and she did it
Works for me every time, too.
I feel false pretenses, too. Like, hey, let's go to lunch. I was working in the corporate world, and she's like, hey, let's go to lunch. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. We get in the car, and I say, hey, where are we going? And she's like, we're going to a money class.
And you're like, no.
Oh, God.
Will there be Chipotle? Okay.
If
then
I
I'm
didn't
on
fear
board.
road rash, I would have jumped out of the car.
So this is a story of Kristen getting invited to a Money 101 class, which is one of Five Rings' most popular presentations that they do, where they teach the average American about money. She drags Ed with promises of burritos, and he says, okay, all right. So you're on board, and you guys go to this Money 101. What happens there?
And I think we were both like dumbfounded by like, oh my gosh, one, we understood it. It just seemed like the biggest no-brainer. And I think within like 3 or 4 days, we were like, yep, and switched everything.
Right.
And we, so obviously we loved the products. We loved how the company showed up. And it wasn't until about 6-8 months later where I found myself in a position where I'm having a one-to-one conversation, one of those like, is she okay?
Right.
Like,
Right.
But having a conversation with myself, just getting to the point where I was like, it's time for you to grow up.
Yeah.
And figure out what you want to be.
Because you had been
Yeah.
looking kind of for opportunities, and you kind of you referred to yourself as unemployable, but just because you were an entrepreneur at heart, right? And you were looking to try to, okay, maybe I should get a quote unquote big girl job, kind of a corporate job, and nothing was speaking to you.
Yeah. I went on a couple of interviews, and I was like, I'm not employable. I can't do that.
Yeah.
Game. I've done that. I've tried it.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so I was just looking and wasn't paying attention to the fact that Andre, who had set us all up,
Andre Semino, right?
Yep, who had set us all up personally, got all of our finances in order, and he kept showing up. And then Ed, you can tell the rest of the story because
So you actually talked about Ed. You described your reaction was almost angry at at this Money 101 because you were like, why have I never been told this? Why has no one shared this information with me?
Yeah, and I wanted to backtrack just a little bit because that's the feeling I had when I was eating my Chipotle burrito, which I thoroughly enjoyed halfway through it.
Right.
But I was listening in the background. And then it hit me. It's like, oh my God, this makes sense. And I looked over at Kristen and I'm like, why didn't anybody tell us about this?
Right.
Yeah.
Because it would have saved us in 01. It would have saved us in 08.
Right.
And in the industry I was in, which was a corporate high-tech industry, it was something where I got in on the dot-com boom.
Right.
And then we lost a lot when it turned into the dot-com.
Right.
And then 08 was terrible. But this was something that we had sat down with 5 or 6 different financial advisors. Everybody talked up here. And we joke about it a lot because Kristen has a degree in accounting and I have a degree in marketing, but we would walk out of these meetings with our financial advisors and be like, what did they say?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm looking at her hoping that she knows, and she's like, I have no idea.
Right. It's something that I've heard people say a lot. And I'm not only specifically talking about your financial advisor. It's almost like the financial advice industry is built to intentionally confuse you.
Yes.
You can't understand this. You're a small-minded, normal
Just
person.
trust us.
Right. Just trust me.
Just
I
trust
know all
us.
the big
Yeah.
words. Right. You don't need to
Right.
know the big words. Just trust me. Right.
Yeah.
This literally made sense. Everything that he was saying made sense. So that's why we quickly, when I say quickly, we very quickly became clients
Right.
and have never looked back.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So this is 2012. Am I right? Wait, no, to 2013.
2013.
You come into the business. You stay at your corporate job.
Right.
You got benefits. You got a salary. You've obviously that's your career. But you describe watching her kind of blossom and bloom and start to thrive with Five Rings Financial, and then that kind of gets you thinking. Talk me through what that thought process is, because obviously, there's job security with a very good company, right. And this is still kind of represents a leap of faith for you. So kind of walk me through that.
Well, my I hate to admit it, but I will. My first thoughts were thoughts of apprehension. It was like, nah, it's too good to be true. I'm not really sure, but watching what was going on with Kristen and watching her numbers grow almost exponentially.
Yeah.
And then watching the shift in her becoming more from doing this to make extra money to like, oh my God, I'm helping people.
Right.
I'm really changing and making a difference in people's lives. I thought that was amazing. So I poured everything I could, not into the business, but into our family. So that Kristen could go out there and do what she was doing and continue to build the business. And I told her, I said, you do this. You get that business going. I can do my job kind of thanklessly at that point.
Right.
And I'm going to take over the family. So I'm going to stop the Home Depot runs. Well, maybe not stop them completely, but
Right.
I'm going to interchange a little bit of that with shopping at the grocery store.
Yeah.
Start shopping, start cooking, start taking care of the family so
Sure.
that you could so Kristen could focus on what she was doing.
Right.
And that was my biggest role in the beginning. But I just described it when we were talking about it, that I honestly looked at her like a money tree.
Yeah.
Because she was blooming. Everything, and not just money, but her emotionally, everything was just blooming. And I'm like, well, I can either not help that.
Let's nourish that.
Yeah,
right.
let's water
see where
that,
it
push
goes.
it into the sunlight, and let it grow. And anything I can do to help that grow, I'm happy to do.
That's amazing. Well, first of all, that's just unbelievable. I mean, you obviously know you have a wonderful partner here, and,
Yeah.
and that support must have been hugely helpful to you.
Massive.
Right.
When you shift, right before I was picking up kids, dropping them off, doing all things,
And trying to do all this in between, trying to grow a business.
and feeling like I had like this much time
Right.
to get anything accomplished. And it was massive to help, because there were some days where, I wouldn't get home until late.
Right.
And then I'd be up doing applications and submitting business, and I didn't have to worry about it. So it was really, really huge. And I can remember when I was driving my daughter somewhere, and she just looked at me and she was just like, I can tell you're really happy. Like,
That's awesome.
when
I
your
remember that.
kids see you
They're so
transforming,
perceptive, right?
yeah, when they see you transforming and changing right before their eyes, what better testament is that? And for us and for me, it was, what could I do differently to show my kids how this is what you're supposed to do, right?
Right.
Like go for your dreams and live out what you really, really love, than to show it, right?
Yeah.
Like to model it.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's incredible. So eventually, you go from being, her supporter and supporting that business, to you start saying, I need even more help. And
yeah.
And she's
what
like,
do you do?
Look
Why
at
don't
the
I-
numbers, Ed. Look at the numbers. And I'm
Right.
like, wait a minute. This is actually starting to get a little crazy, because it was 2.5 years. She started tapping me on the shoulder.
Yep.
I say, well, let's think about this. You leaving your job and coming to work with me full time. And I'm like, that's a little spooky.
Yeah.
And started looking at the numbers then. And we started preparing for it, meaning putting money away, getting things paid off just in case that day came. And then we were like 3 years into it. And I'm not kidding you. When you look at somebody who starts a business and in that short amount of time is able to triple the 6-figure income, it becomes a little bit of a no-brainer.
Yeah, right.
With, unfortunately, after being 20 years in the corporate world, you get comfortable.
Yeah.
But there was also a little bit of apprehension on my side.
Of course. Of course.
It's like, yes, let's do it. No, let's not.
Right.
Yes, let's do it. No, let's not.
Yeah.
So,
Well, you have other things there besides just income to think about, right? You have benefits and
Yeah.
and that whole thing. You kind of get addicted to the stability and to the structure that a career job like that,
Absolutely.
a corporate job like that. So that was obviously challenging for you to let go. I think one story that Kristen told was, you were like, well, what about the benefits? We're gonna have to pay for health insurance, right? And she was
Yeah,
like, well, we'll just make more money and pay for it ourselves.
and that's such a true statement too. And it came out, it wasn't something where she had to think about it. And that's what impressed me, because I'm like, if we have to do the health insurance on our own, you know how much that's going to cost? And she's like, well, just make more money. Like, duh.
Yeah. Duh.
And the confidence there was it was overwhelming. It was awesome.
That's fantastic. I love hearing that. So, all right. So let's actually backtrack a little bit, because we might have some people who are listening who don't know what Five Rings does. We've kind of discussed Money 101, which is kind of this class to educate Americans about money. The whole thing is, we learned reading, writing, and arithmetic in schools, but we didn't learn just basic stuff about money that everybody should know. And that's where
Exactly.
Five Rings really goes to fill that gap with their Money 101 classes that they have, which are obviously wildly successful. This is where people come in and they watch this class, they take part in this presentation, and then they decide that they want to work with Five Rings as clients. They want Five Rings agents to help them with some of these money problems. Solutions that you guys provide cover lots of different things. Living benefits, IUL for kids, indexed accounts. These are solutions that you guys can help clients with and are helping clients with every day, correct?
Yep.
So talk about that a little bit. Talk about some of these basic services that you guys can provide and what that can mean for your clients.
But I'll let you jump into the IULs and the living benefits. But I just want to start out because I do a lot of Money 101.
Sure.
And when I'm doing the Money 101s, when I'm talking about concepts and principles that people have never really heard of, it's not just, in the living benefits, in the IULs. It's also the basic principles of compound interest.
Right.
And when I'm doing a Money 101 and I'm looking at people and I'm talking about compound interest and I show them those examples of how money can grow and compound over time, you literally see their eyes go wide open.
Yeah.
And then we talk about, there's places where you can grow your money. We talk about taxable versus non-taxable.
Right.
And a lot of people never conceptualize that and really understand what that means until you show them the examples. And they're like, oh my God, I'm missing out.
Right. Yeah.
And the big one is when you talk to people not only about living benefits, but hey, do you know that you don't have to lose money in the stock market, but you can still get upside gains?
Right.
That's another one where people constantly, after Money 101s, they come up to me and it's like, how come nobody ever told me? And then that was one of my big ones where I put my hand up and I'm like, how come nobody told me?
Right.
So those are the basic concepts and principles that I love. I mean, they're simple, but we aren't taught those in school.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's a very common reaction to somebody who has gone through a Money 101 class is just like, it's exactly that. It's why this was a very simple thing. I just sat here for an hour and I learned more about the basics of finance and money than I have my entire life.
Yeah, we hear that all the time.
Right.
I love that.
Yeah, because they're not concepts that they've never heard of before. It's just that they don't know how they actually work or even how to apply them.
Right.
And really, I think Five Rings does an amazing job of creating an environment for people to come and learn about that stuff because everyone's really curious. They want to learn how to master their money.
Right.
But there's really no environment to do that in. That doesn't have, hey, come to this really expensive dinner and then we're going to expect to hound you.
Right. We're going to stick a name tag on your chest.
Yes, and we're going to follow you for the rest of your life.
Fill out the form, and we're going to sit you down right.
Yeah, or those really concentrate on one area, right? They're not looking.
They're trying to sell one product.
Yeah, and so they're not trying to look at them as, husband, wife, or a family unit, or whatever situation they have, whether it's divorced. Whatever.
Yeah, whatever family dynamic they might be in.
Yeah, and so we do an amazing job of removing some barriers, right? Like just paying it forward, giving them information with no, like, hey, we are a volunteer organization.
Right.
Right? People volunteer to work with us. People volunteer, whether it's on the client side or even the agent side.
Right.
And so that's what makes it a lot different. And there's no sales pitch, there's no anything. It's like, here's the information, come and get it. And then it's really like when we sit down with people individually, then it's more conversation, more education. And I really see our job as bringing more or a different perspective. Like I really feel like I ask different questions that they've never been asked before or have even thought about asking themselves when it comes to their money. Because people just don't know what to ask.
Right. Yeah.
They put a lot of shoulds with the word money. I should be doing this with my money. I know I should, da-da-da-da-da. They should all over themselves. And
they should all over themselves.
Right? And so we like to remove that should, right?
Yeah.
And really start asking them, what is it that you want to create? And then start opening their eyes to there's so much more flexibility and availability to create so that you're actually doing what you really, really want to do.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can build that future. You just have to know what steps to take, and you have to take those steps consistently, over time.
Yep.
Which is, I think, a big kind of moment of clarity that people have after a Money 101. So you guys became clients after seeing a Money 101. Eventually that led to the opportunity where you were like, why aren't we want to do this? We want to help other people kind of discover the same thing that we've discovered. And then you started working in Five Rings and actually helping do these Money 101 classes, inviting people to these classes, helping spread awareness that way. Now we fast forward 10 years later. Wow. 10 years later, Five Rings, as we discussed before, is exploding. Ed obviously has been with the company now for 6 years himself. You guys are now in the position where your life has been transformed
Yeah.
by Five Rings Financial. I mean, remember where we started, you get invited to a class, you drag Ed along. This is, you guys are in completely different place in your lives and your career. And here we are 10 years later, Five Rings is exploding. Your businesses are exploding. And the opportunity is really there to help other people, to bring other people up and to help them kind of discover what, the same impact that Five Rings made on your life. So talk about that impact. Talk about how Five Rings has touched your lives in so many different ways. I've got just a few. We had a previous discussion before we started the podcast, but as far as time flexibility and work-life balance, as far as the travel you guys have been able to do, the income, obviously, the friendships that Five Rings has brought to you, and the support system you guys have, and then also that kind of personal fulfillment. So let's actually start with just which one of those would you guys like to start with? I mean, it's touched every part of your life.
Yeah. Well, for you, I mean...
Well, for me, if I go back to, excuse me, when I was in the corporate world, it was a grind. It was constantly a grind. Mm-hmm. And when Kristen was talking about our daughter, looking at her and saying, "Oh my God, I see something different in you." Well, I was getting the same kind of reaction from my kids. It was like, "Ooh, Dad's always grumpy."
Yeah.
Even though we've talked about this, even though I thought for a long time that I was really good at hiding it. Mm-hmm. Kristen's like, "No, you weren't." She's like, "You were not good at hiding it." I thought I was.
The rat race can be a grind, yeah.
It can. When you're doing something for that many hours a day, for that long, and knowing that you're really not helping or impacting anybody and really not happy or satisfied with anything other than the money and the benefits.
Right.
That does not equal fulfillment on any level. And this was completely and totally different because I felt that. And then I went from working in that corporate world to working with Kristen full time. And all of a sudden, I'm not missing football games. I'm not missing soccer games.
You're not getting called away from the lake to go work.
Oh, that still is a pet peeve of hers.
Yeah.
When you're out Memorial Day weekend and you're at the lake and you get a call and it's like, "Hey, your big $35 million deal is on the rocks. You got to get in." And I'm like, "Oh my God!" And you have to leave. There's no question in it.
Wow.
And this is completely and totally different.
Yeah, and that's something that's very common, I think, with people in their jobs that they just think, well, this is just the way the work is. You know, sometimes you just have to you have to grind. It is the rat race, and something that you said that really struck me is you're just working for the money. I mean, most people might be watching this and be like, well, yeah, why isn't that what we're all doing? We're just working so we can pay the bills so that we can continue to live, right?
Very few people enjoy what they're doing, unfortunately, and that's what we have found.
And I think that's called surviving.
Right.
Right? Versus living.
Living to work.
Yeah. So now we get to live on intention. Mm-hmm. And whatever that looks like, this week's going to be a little bit interesting because we're here for a couple of days. We go home, and then Ed will take Brody to a football camp in Rhode Island and come home, and then we leave for a vacation on Saturday to go to Costa Rica. And
that's pretty, it sounds like people watching this, like, that sounds like an amazing week. Like, yeah, it's kind of just another week in the life of the Judds, right?
Yeah.
It really is. And we have a lot of that. As a matter of fact, I got a haircut on last week, Thursday, I think. And when I got my haircut, the lady asked me, she's cutting my hair. She's like, "Oh, so you have a vacation today. You took a vacation day." I'm like, "No, we work for ourselves."
Right. I'm on vacation every day.
And it's not that you're on vacation every day, but you can set your schedule.
Sure.
And I told her that. And it's just when you see somebody just kind of open their eyes like, oh.
It goes against the matrix, right?
It really does. That's a great way to put it. It goes against the matrix.
Right. It's, and again, talking about travel, talking about vacation.
Yes.
You guys have this career in Five Rings has delivered you guys all over the world. I mean, just talk about some of those those places that you've been, and as a direct result of working with Five Rings Financial.
It was, for me, honestly, it was one of the greatest draws of working with Five Rings because we were in that space where we were just surviving.
Yeah.
We were just doing whatever we could to make sure the kids were getting fed. We kept the house, a roof over our head. And we didn't get to vacation that much. I mean,
No,
we
when
got,
you're making a six-figure income in today's world, and especially where we are from, Colorado,
yeah.
it doesn't go very far.
Right.
I
Yeah.
mean, it sounds impressive. It's like, oh my God, that's awesome. You're doing great. You got life by the tail. It's like, no, you really don't.
Right.
You're just
Yeah.
barely making ends meet.
It's
Unfortunately,
crazy, right?
yeah.
And so the vacation part
And
was.
she loves the vacation.
Yeah.
I love it.
Of
I love
course.
experiences, love to travel, love to do all that stuff. And with companies like Alliance, we've been able to do some bucket list kind of spaces,
Yeah,
which is
right.
really awesome. Like Aruba was always on that place,
Yeah.
Dominican Republic,
Hawaii.
We've
St.
been to
Kitts.
Cabo.
You guys have been
yeah.
all over the place.
And we love Cabo. So, but it's been really just awesome. And the funny part is now is that everybody's always like, well, where are the Judds now?
Right. Yeah, I know. And
Where are
it's-
they going now? You guys travel a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I'm included in that because, yes, of course, you go on great trips with Alliance Group. There's other insurance companies that you work with that you guys earn.
Yep.
And then you also do some personal vacations on top of that. So, and this is a very common thing throughout Five Rings is there's people at Five Rings that it seems like they're constantly traveling and they're constantly going somewhere. And it's a very kind of almost glamorous lifestyle that's afforded to them, not only because they have that flexibility of work life balance, but also because if you stick with the system
Right.
that you guys have, success is pretty much inevitable as long as you're willing to be resilient and work your way
I think
through.
that's just life in general,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people forget that there is a lot of hard work, grind, persistency, resiliency. We've
Yeah.
talked about that,
Yep.
and of just showing up every day.
Yep.
And for us, in the beginning, or for me, it was what got me hooked was watching someone, sitting down with a client and watching them transform before my eyes. Like they go from, I'm so stressed out, I don't know what I'm doing, maybe even crying or whatever.
Right.
And then, in a month or so, once everything's in place, that they're like glowing and confident and can go out and do their thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I was like, oh, that is a wonder drug.
Yeah. It's
But then-
transformative. Yeah.
But then to watch agents change their lives through this business of being able to move wherever they want, create their lifestyle, just do the things that they've always wanted. And that's really like a write your own ticket.
Yeah, yeah. People don't realize that it doesn't have to be that way. Something Ed was talking about is you have people that you've worked with that you've brought into the industry that were actually making great money, and we're quote unquote successful in their career, but they just weren't fulfilled by it, right?
Yeah. Like there's something's missing.
Right.
And they're looking for more. That's where I was. I mean, I was looking for more. I was like built for something. I knew I wanted to do great things. You go back to those childhood thoughts of like, oh, I'm gonna save the world or whatever.
Yeah.
And then here, you do it one family at a time, right? And
Well, yeah. Let's talk about one family at a time. Let's go back to again, kind of talking about that fulfillment, right? You guys have been able to help clients in incredible, long-lasting, ways. You do have one living benefits claim, one of several, I believe.
Yeah.
But you were able to get over $800,000 into one of your clients' hands using these tools that Five Rings Financial works with. You delivered over $800,000 in a check to one of your personal clients who came to a Money 101, I imagine, reached out to you,
Actually,
and you worked with.
Personal friend
Really?
from high school.
Wow.
Yeah.
yeah.
So tell me about
and
that.
maybe shame on us that she was watching everything that Kristen was doing on Facebook, and she reached out to us, and that's where that whole thing began. But
Wow.
hadn't really engaged with her in 15 years
Yeah.
or more.
Yeah. I think we accidentally ran into her at some kind of like
Yeah, show somewhere
show
downtown,
something,
Uh-huh.
whatever. And that was the last time we saw her. And then we reconnected, and she was at a space where she's like, yep, I'm ready to get our finances back in order, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah. Wanted to learn more. And so we met with them a couple of times.
Well, and let me just go back to that time when we first met her. And I remember looking at her, and I'm like, she looked different. And I gave her a hug, and I said, I told her that. I said, you look good. You look different, something like that. And she's like, well, having cancer will change somebody. And I'm like, oh my God.
Which is
Now
why
somebody
she
has to help me
started
get my
reaching
foot
to
out of my
everybody.
mouth
Yeah.
because that was I had no idea.
Oh, wow.
So she had gone through breast cancer, had a double mastectomy, but she was on the other side of it. But it was that experience that she went through that she's like, oh my God, I really put my family at risk, and we need to make sure that somebody in this family is covered.
So she had already had cancer, I see, and then she had approached you. She had obviously seen something about living benefits.
Yeah, or I'm not sure what she saw, but she just knew that now was the time to kind of rebuild the finances after
Yep.
going through something like that.
That makes sense.
And so we connected, did a private Money 101 for them, and just kind of went through the conversation. And she's like, "Yep, we definitely need to get the living benefits on her husband, and because she wouldn't qualify yet.
Right.
He didn't want it.
At all.
Wow.
No, he was pretty adamant about the fact. He's like, no.
It was a fight.
He's like, where we come from, we don't do that. We don't do life insurance.
Wow.
He felt like it attracted or brought stuff in, but she was pretty persistent.
Yeah.
And
he was smart.
She wanted it, but she couldn't get it, so she was going to insist
Yeah.
that her husband.
And every
Yep.
smart
Get
husband will
protected.
listen to his wife eventually.
Yes, of course.
Right?
Eventually, yes.
So-
when you're married long enough, you just know, right?
Yeah, it happens.
Exactly. Comes with experience. So then her husband actually had he was the subject of that claim, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So it was about 6 months after we had the policy in place that he started having 15 to 20 seizures a day.
A day. Yeah.
And
A lot of people correct me when I say that, and they're like, you mean a month? We're like, no, a day.
a day. So she didn't call me. So that started in like November. And then she called. We were at Alliance Academy is when she called me. And I had just found out. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to have my first claim. And at first, wasn't sure. We filed it under the critical illness piece of it. Then he had surgery, and they found out it was a grade 4 glioblastoma. So at that point, they were like, yes, super terminal.
It's terminal, right?
Yeah. And so switched it over to the terminal piece. And because it was under the 2-year mark, really just dove into what that whole piece was
Right.
all
They have
about.
to make sure they go over the original application and that everything was
the
represented
deep
properly.
dive, the 5 years,
Yeah.
the interviews, all of that, and found out everything. They were still on the hook,
Yeah.
so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. And over $800,000 paid out.
And that experience rocked me.
Now, I know this is probably a hard thing for you to do, but I think you should share it, what he told you.
Yeah. So when we went,
Good luck.
I know. So we went and delivered the check personally to them, and it was right before Thanksgiving. And
Now, keep in mind that his wife and 3 younger children, too.
Oh, man.
yeah,
And this is a terminal illness. And
Yeah.
probably not, just months.
Yeah, unfortunately.
yeah. And he was still in a pretty good space. I mean, he was out there cleaning up snow at that point, and moving around. And he just thought it was. He's like, oh, this will take forever, right? Like this will.
Yeah, the claim.
You know,
Keep in
whatever.
mind,
This,
they had just gone through the whole breast cancer thing with his wife.
Right.
And you said that every dime that came from insurance was a fight, an absolute fight. And he looked at what we were doing like, yeah, sure.
Yeah, it'll eventually get there, maybe.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe, if never.
Right.
That was his thought.
And so he was like, I can't believe this actually happened and this actually worked. And at that point, he just looked at me and he said, "There's a special place in heaven for you."
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
How does that
rocks
how does
you.
that not change your life?
Yeah. You know, it's something that we talk about all the time. You know, very few people have the opportunity throughout their working lives to truly make an impact on somebody's life. And, I mean, I don't, I always use this example for some reason. My mom was a loan officer at a bank, right? Mm-hmm. She would like to think that she changed people's lives, but honestly, like change people's lives or get them a good rate on a mortgage or something like that, not necessarily life changing. There are very, very few lines of work where you can truly profoundly impact somebody's life the way that you did for that family,
Yeah.
in a way that doesn't just help those members of that immediate family, but that will echo for generations. That money and what you were able to deliver in their darkest time, and I think that is something that honestly we don't talk about enough, and it's something that's very unique to what Five Rings does and what we do in this industry.
In general, it is extremely unique. I mean, in situations like that, we talk about it all the time. This is times when people are coming to your door saying, "Hey, where's your mortgage payment? Mm-hmm. Car payment's late. We might have to repossess that." Getting calls from the bank and creditors, and we're on the other side of that. We show up with money. We had a client not too long ago that her husband passed away, and younger guy, like 34, and it was whatever, but he passed away, and we didn't know about it. Had seen something come up on Facebook, and we got a call about that same time from the wife.
Right.
And we had noticed that they had actually started to GoFundMe for the family, a wife and 5 young kids.
Oh my gosh.
Wondering how they were going to make ends meet, if they could stay in their home, if they're going to be able to keep their car, which wasn't running good at the time anyway.
Right.
And then Kristen and I are able to go to the door and give the family a check for, in that case, it was
Over $1 million.
a little over $1 million.
Oh my gosh.
How can you imagine the impact though? And literally, I mean, I guarantee that nobody in that family would take that $1 million over their dad,
Of course.
or their husband. But in that particular scenario, you could see the relief in her eyes, like, oh my God, I can breathe. I can keep this family together.
Right. And I can grieve, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because when you're faced with creditors and wondering if you're going to be able to stay in your home, if this GoFundMe, which was not created for that,
Right.
is that going to be able to support my family? In most cases, it's not.
Right.
And they had a lot of medical expenses left over, from that whole deal. So, yeah, now you have time. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
You have time just to breathe and grieve and just get through it.
Right. And get through it without worrying about, the financial repercussions of this.
Exactly.
It is it is an amazing thing that we do and that you all do. So you have this opportunity that you've been afforded, and you guys describe this as a blessing. Five Rings has been, again, it's kind of touched your family and your careers and your lives in all these different ways. If you are looking to bring someone in and to kind of show them the path that your lives took, it's not an opportunity for everybody, right? I've heard you guys say that this job is not easy, but it is simple.
Yeah.
There is a system, and we talked about what Five Rings has done, going from a little over $1 million of production as a company 10 years ago to going to be over $20 million this year, and really the explosion's happening recently. It's because that system is time tested and it is perfected, and if people follow it, it's almost inevitable that they will see success unless they give up too early in the process, right? So talk about what are the right kinds of people for Five Rings Financial that are the most ideal types of people. What are those qualities that you're looking for in somebody that might succeed in this system?
So I'll start out with, because of where I came from.
Sure.
When you're working in a job and you're making great money, you've got the benefits, but you're not spending time with your family. You're not doing the things you want to do. And really, even more than that, when you just feel completely and totally unfulfilled at the end of the day, then you're looking for something else.
Yeah.
And if you want to do something where you're giving back and you're helping people, this is absolutely it. And after 20 years in the corporate world and now doing what I'm doing now, I tell people all the time that this is honestly my give back career. And I love having that background and being able to say that, because really, in doing what we're doing and seeing the change that we make in people's lives, it will change everything. So it's not always about the money, because guess what? The money will follow.
That's the beautiful thing about it. Is we have noticed that the money tends to follow when people are doing things for the right reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Give back career. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. So as you mentioned before, this business can feel a little overwhelming, a little daunting, and because we're talking to people about the most emotional thing, money.
Right. Yeah.
Money and death. Right.
Right. Yeah.
And so, we're really looking for people who have been business owners before and already have that adversity quotient,
That entrepreneurial spirit.
The entrepreneurial spirit, they already know that they've been through some stuff, and they know they can get through it.
Right.
Right.
Resilience, right?
Yes.
And,
yeah.
and determination and perseverance, all of those things
Yeah.
that any successful entrepreneur is going to have. Right.
And then I always say that we're also looking for people who are super coachable. Like they know how to get in there. They know how to show up. It's really about the show up.
Yeah.
Show up every day,
Every
even if
single
it's
day.
just for a little bit, right, in the very beginning. Maybe it's someone who maybe they really love what they are doing during the day, but just want more.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They can do it on a part-time basis.
Absolutely. We've had we've had tons of people start part-time and then slowly, transition into a full-time gig, right?
And we found it's the best way to start,
Yeah.
really.
Dip your toe in. You don't have to make you don't have to, quit your job today and jump in full bore.
No, yeah.
You can kind of dip your toe in and see how it is.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be that scary.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're just looking for people who want more, know that they're
looking for more.
They're just looking for more, and they might. I didn't know what I was looking for when I started. Right. Like I was looking. I was telling my network, hey, I'm looking, and I didn't know what that was. But for this, this company, the culture, you get adopted into another family. I don't think I've ever been around another environment, work environment that welcomed you in and loved you so much and so hard.
Yeah, it is an
Right?
amazing culture you guys have built at Five Rings Financial. It's incredible.
The first corporate job I had, which was bought by another big corporation, I'm not going to go into names, but in that job, when I first started there, was a lot of hats, T-shirts, just swag, a bunch of stuff. And the CEO of the company always said, he joked about it, that when you start with us, you don't just get a job, you get a wardrobe. And I like to say that when you start with Five Rings Financial, you just don't get a business. You actually do get a family with that.
It is
And
incredible.
the family and support system has been, it is part of how you grow and become successful.
Yep.
Because if you don't immerse yourself in that, you leave so much on the table.
Yeah, it's very true. And that family is growing and getting bigger and bigger with every single passing day and every passing
Absolutely.
week and month and year at Five Rings Financial. It's one of the great success stories in this industry, and you two have been a huge, huge part of that. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for the work that you're doing with your clients, and thank you for joining us on the Alliance Group podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks
It was
for
fun.
having us.
Yeah.
This was great.
Like being out here.
Listen to this interview and more on the Alliance Group podcast.